Now, we are moving to our first panel session of the day, moderated by Maria Kristalinskaya, who is head of retail media at Kleinanzeigen. And we will be discussing the retail media networks, the next frontier. So welcome, Maria, and over to you and your panelists.
Thank you, Patricia. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you and especially take over after such a great presentation and continue on the topic of retail media networks, as was outlined by Daniel, is quite evolving and we see a lot of trends. But before we go further, I would like to invite all the panelists with whom we share the session today and maybe just say a few words, introduce yourself. Maurits, do you want to go first?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Maurits Priem. I'm Vice President for Retail Media in Europe and Indonesia at Ahold Delhaize, which is Benelux, Czech, Serbia, Romania, Greece, and it's grocery mainly.
Mark, do you want to also say a few words, maybe?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Mark James, Senior Director for EMEA at Flywheel. If you're not aware of Flywheel, we are now proudly the commerce practice area within Omnicom. And we've been helping brands primarily in the enterprise category with their retail and retail media strategy for a number of years now. Pleasure to be here today.
Thank you, Mark. Gonzalo, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Maria. Pleasure to be here. My name is Gonzalo Di La Mata. I'm the Global Commerce Lead at Zenith International. My responsibility is to align and develop our group commerce capabilities around the consultancy, retail media, and online marketplaces for our Zenith International clients.
Last but definitely not least, Georgia.
Hello, thank you. So I'm Georgia Martin. I am the Group Partnership Director at SMG, and I currently actually look after the Boots Media Group Retail Media Network, which is one of the UK's leading retail media networks.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome. And also welcome to everyone who's listening to us today. Please ask us all the toughest questions. And we have a really unique group today of the panelists. And maybe to warm up and start a little bit, we heard quite a lot of trends already, like data clean rooms, efficiency, ROI, that are in front of retail media networks. But also it's interesting to get your point of views. What are the trends you are seeing? And at this point, I will start once again with Maurits. I know that he could talk maybe in the next 24 hours about the trends. So please make sure you have some room for others to add. But yeah, it will be very exciting to hear what trends you see.
Well, to begin with growth, yeah. I hope that's not too big of a surprise for the people in the webinar. So more than 30 billion, probably up to 2028. Lots of consolidation, as we've already seen in the previous presentation. I think in the end, winners will take all. We'll see new and adjacent entrants to the retail media area, like food delivery, for example, but also hospitality business coming in. Lots of professionalization, both sides, by the way, supply and demand. I expect standardization with all the good work that the IAB, of course, is doing. Much more omni-channel targeting and also closed loop based on the first-party data, more self-service, more upper funnel inventory, so more branding, more video, more offsite, and more offsite and extended reach anyhow. We'll also see non-endemic joining the retail media party, so non-endemic advertisers, that is. And of course, like in every business, AI will start playing a role. Multiple use cases, AI supported planning, AI supported workflows, creative versioning. I expect a lot from that as well, but also optimization and targeting. And then last but not least, I also expect that and see more and more examples of social commerce. It will probably never reach the level that we see in Asia for multiple reasons. Nevertheless, it would be naive to think that we're not going to see social commerce grow in Europe as well.
Thank you, Maurits. Gonzalo, anything to add from the media agency side?
Definitely, just some more So one of the things is just to go like a little bit back, in terms of to be an approach more simple, and the asks and the trends that we see from our clients is essentially how we move, retail media and retail media networks, from a tactical channel to be like a pure strategic opportunity for our brands. So what we see in this phase is tap, real brand and media budget, beyond the typical shopper marketing and basic brand dollars. And the idea is these all retail media networks needs to invest in technology to offer media excellence, because in reality is to be on par, with the other big advertisers giants, the likes of Meta or Google. Because at the end, what we provide is access, to point of sales and first party data. And this is the real trend of the real ask that we have from our clients, to get engaged with the senior level marketeers to both retail media to the next phase.
Mark, what is your point of view on the trends?
Firstly, it's very hard to follow a presentation like we've just seen to talk about trends, but I do want to touch on a couple of macro points that I think are important. So one is that when we talk about performance, actually the e-commerce performance in retail is a very positive sign. If we look at the US, Walmart in the US just showed 22% increase period over period in their e-commerce business, and Carrefour here in Europe showed 30% increase. So that's pretty interesting that the e-commerce business is doing really healthily. But we're now seeing some of these large retailers break out their effectively retail media business results when they do their investor reports, right? So Walmart Connect is showing 26% growth, and I think it's called 360 Calls, 20% growth, which may on the face of it not seem like a major trend as such, but the fact that this is to investors and being on these earnings calls released as separate lines and reported on separately is, I think, a massively interesting trend. It shows just the importance on the overall P&L. The other two things I will call out, one is that we have to look at the consumer trends as much as the retailer trends. And what we do know is that consumer spending on essentials is up, but discretionary spending is going down. And that's despite of there being, a more positive, let's say, consumer certainty, despite some other macro trends happening out in the market. But what's also happening is that in every consumer segment, whether it's kind of up, middle, or bottom of the market, are willing to trade down, so to buy cheaper products, whilst at the same time, particularly the supermarkets are pushing their own private labels. And interestingly, they also call that out in some of their investor reports, which again, on the face of it, might not seem like a super interesting trend, but why that's important is it just shows the importance of both in-store and online retail media presence in face of consumer spending increasingly becoming elastic and being willing to trade down, whilst at the same time supermarkets pushing their own private label. So that front of mind that Andrew was talking about a moment ago becomes more and more important in the face of those trends, in my opinion.
I think it's very interesting that you brought this point of in-store and online retail media. And I think retail media, the online one, is developing more and more. And this is actually the hype, but we completely forget about in-store retail media. And I would like to ask Georgia here, she's coming from the brand that represents both. What is really, from your perspective, the unique selling proposition of in-store and online retail media versus classical channels, traditional advertising channels, and especially for online retail media networks, how we could position them differently? We heard already some points that it could be sold with potentially data offering from Gonzalo, or with additional channels like social media commerce. What do you see on your side, Georgia?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So I think the point of difference for retail media, you have to come back to that rich first party data. So retailers have banks of data, which is so important, and the data is, we can manipulate it in a way that's really useful. So for Boots, for example, they've got 17 million active Advantage card users, and that's continuing to grow and continuing to grow. And the reason it's continuing to grow is actually because those customers are really seeing the value in this targeted advertising that we're able to offer in partnership with brands. So through that audience data, what we're able to offer is of closed loop measurement. So we're able to understand which of those audiences we've targeted, which have been exposed to the advertising and when they've been exposed to that advertising, and then actually what purchase behavior they then went on to show. So whether that is actually buying in store or buying online. So we're able to look at it from literally the beginning of the journey to the end of the journey. And I think the point on in-store is actually really important. I think one of the trends that I'm seeing actually is retail media networks across the board are investing more in their in-store estate. So you've seen an awful lot around digitization of the stores. So the rollout of digital screens, the rollout of digital radio. And what that allows you to do is true omni-channel campaign planning. So you're able to link off-site audiences, you're able to link on-site, and now you're able to link in-store as well. And through that closed loop measurement, what you're able to do is you're able to understand actually from a total perspective, from the full funnel, who's seen your advertising, where it's been effective, and also you're able to continue to retarget and actually have more longevity in your campaigns.
I really like that we went from a theoretical discussion to real life examples. Thank you for bringing this and also sharing the data and how you operate with the loyalty cards. I also would like to bring maybe Maurits right now here, if he could share some examples how to position retail media and how you already maybe have been positioning it with your experience as a competitor to traditional advertising channels.
Well, much of what I would have to say was perfectly presented already in the first presentation that we had in this webinar. It's so to begin with, retail media networks almost by definition supply a brand safe context, which is relevant. Yeah, you will not have hate speech or what have you in the context of a retail media network in comparison to lots of other media. Then there's of course additional and unique reach. And to name just one in particular is Gen Z, very hard to reach audience that you will be able to catch with retail media networks. Then of course there is, as was just pointed out by Georgia, the targeting based on transactional data. Yeah, so not based on what people search or what people like, but on what people actually buy, which is in my opinion much more relevant. So it's not just behavior. Then there's of course first-party data versus the cookie depreciation, and then something that was also already covered in the first presentation that we had is that you will be able to target consumers in the buying mode, which means that they will have higher attention, they're more open to ads, and then they're also longer dwell times, specifically in store, and all of this is happening at point of sale. And all of these 6 points are really differentiating retail media networks from other media. And then, last but not least, there's maybe one thing to add is that most of the people in calls like these come from a media background. And when we're talking in store, the first thing they think about is digital. But there is actually offline in-store media as well. And I keep on telling everybody is that, yes, it's interesting to do, if you have a banner, nice. Then if you have moving pictures, even better. You can have augmented reality. It's almost like real persons talking to you. Well, surprise, surprise, offline media, so demonstrations or tastings on the shop floor, that is actual people. You will be able to touch, feel, taste, smell. There will be somebody talking to you. That's real consumer experience. It goes beyond whatever you could do in a video. Yeah.
And it's very interesting because we received just a question exactly on this topic about in-store retail media and that we forget about this. Maybe in a few words, back to you, Maurits, as you touched on this topic, any tip you would give how to plan, integrate, and strategize in-store campaign, in-store activation to make it really efficient?
Well, as long as it's digital, of course, you can do it relatively efficient. And as soon as you start working with real people, real tastings, etc., it gets a bit more difficult. And what we see over and over again is that many retailers have outsourced this to other parties. And more and more retailers begin to understand that there is a huge opportunity there, and you should maybe get this more into your own hands. So, but integrating it, of course, is asking for a booking calendar, for example, where you could, well, at least manually combine the different inventory pieces to one overall campaign. But even better would be is that you would be able to offer that self-service. And there's, as far as I know, no real examples yet of self-service solutions where it's made really easy to build a campaign that is both offline and online.
Indeed. And I think in general, there is quite a lot of hype about retail media. We would not lie about that. But there is also a lot of dissatisfaction that is coming with it, that brands initially hoped for different results or different outcomes. And I would like to ask here a question. What could be done in advance by brands to efficiently use retail media networks? What do they need to think about planning the campaign to avoid this sense of dissatisfaction and overall, yeah, I don't want to use retail media networks anymore effect? Gonzalo, what do you do on the media agency side to prevent this negative feeling?
Thanks, Maria. So related, to the European landscape, because ultimately, we have, this fragmentation element. So what we're doing much more is to try, to concentrate therefore on a select group of high impact, retail media networks. Yeah, that's, for us where we see that maybe the dissatisfaction on this year or last year was about the level of inventory, so it was the nascent, landscape that is Europe. So now that we see is have a more tactical approach to see what are the retail media networks that have more high impact, for our advertiser, and this is where we push them,
What about you, Mark? What are you doing with Flywheel?
Yeah, so two themes really. Like one is we're really attempting at every stage to not think about retail media, or to be honest, more broadly, commerce as a bolt-on, but something that's built in to strategy and planning. And so that might sound like a shift in just kind of naming convention, but fundamentally what we're saying is that commerce touch points and engaging with the consumer, both online and offline in the commerce world, should be part of the overall strategy and should be built into the plan and should be measured in the same way as every other stage of that plan, right? Look through the same lens and ideally measured in the same space. And I'll come on to the measurement in a second. But we talk about this really as like connected commerce planning, but that's really what the concept is like, stop having a separate commerce strategy sat over here with separate metrics being run in isolation, but build it into the overall plan. The second part of that is the measurement piece. So I think for probably, it's been a bit of a double-edged sword for us in this space, right? The like retail media's had the beauty of being so close to the point of purchase that everybody's got used to looking at it through the lens of either purchases or incremental purchases. But if this is part of a now much more fluid customer journey where maybe they're at the point of sale but not ready to buy, and that's happening more and more frequently, then we need to look at the effectiveness of the media through probably a different lens to what we have done in the past. On our end, I mean, there's lots of different answers to that question. That's probably a webinar on in and of itself, but we're trying to bounce back to two things with clients. One is their market share. Like ultimately, when you strip it all back, this is all about growing their penetration in their given market. And the second ties to what Andrew was saying earlier, which is this either effectively driving a new customer purchase or a new to brand purchase, or a repeat purchase and fostering loyalty and lifetime value? And everything else is kind of incidental. So they're the two things that we're thinking a lot about is how do you bring commerce into like a really connected commerce planning and activation environment, and how do you measure it effectively with the metrics that you're trying to move the needle on, and not just the metrics we're used to looking at retail media in over the last few years.
And I think here we also need to address a question that usually retail media networks results are measured with Facebook, Google, and other players like Amazon. And it will be very interesting to hear your perspective, how to communicate the metrics that will be different for retail media networks, because indeed we talk about incremental sales, for example, where we don't talk about it with Meta. So how do you approach conversations about performance, about efficiency with the customers for the networks you're facing? Maybe let's start with Georgia.
Yeah, so I think this is a really relevant one for so many brands. The thing that I always start with is the idea of objective-led planning. So every brand has a different budget, and we have an array of different media across offsite, in-store, on-site, you know, even PR to an extent that we can essentially build campaigns with. But what's really important is actually we come back to what the objective of that campaign is. And what we're finding more and more is, you know, if ROI is your main objective and that is the number one thing you look at, then that's absolutely fine. And there are things that we can do at the point of purchase which can really help with that. But actually, what we really should be thinking for retail media are these other metrics. So we find that actually retail media is really brilliant at driving new to brand. So shoppers that are incremental to your brand, they have not been buying your brand before, but through that customer data, we can understand which of those shoppers are buying your competitor brands and what strategies we can then put in place to be able to move that across to your brand. So I think it's really important that we look beyond that short-term metric and start to really understand the total value of retail media. And actually that might be beyond the short-term ROAS or ROI. It might be more towards actually the longer-term customer lifetime value, for example.
Yeah, I remember when we were working first on the IB standardization report, there were a lot of conversations about measurement. What do we measure? What do we provide? And I think today, Mark, you mentioned Walmart, what kind of metrics we see our UX colleagues providing. We are going to be always very far from that, but I think we are moving in this direction. And here I would like to also address maybe Maurits, what are the measurements you were looking for to provide and especially to justify efficiency of retail media networks to the brands?
Whoa, yeah, well, again, you know, that would be a whole webinar on this topic. I'm going to pick out just one point then, and that is that with retail media networks offering more and more up-funnel inventory, so that's more on branding and awareness, there is also a responsibility for retail media networks to also explore that area much more. So we need way more research into what the effect, the awareness and the branding effect of retail media networks are, because there's lots of things happening, of course, as most of the discussions are on conversion. And how do we measure? What's a halo effect? What's new to brand? Research online, purchase offline, what have you. Yeah, what's iROAS in comparison to ROAS? All of that now, park that for a moment. And I pick out this one example is that if retail media networks, and they are offering more and more upper funnel inventory, they should also be able, they should also make sure that they take responsibility there on measurement, just the same.
And indeed, the time is flying. We could have done at least 4 hours straight of conversations and webinars on the different topics. Maybe to wrap it up, what are your top priorities for the next 6 months? Very short sentence. Let's start with Gonzalo. What are your top priorities regarding retail media networks for the next 6 months?
Just to echo the first point that I made at the beginning is, how we help our clients, to move or see, retail media from a tactical channel to a powerful, strategic opportunity for the brands. So things about, media excellence, how develop, this brand partnership that will be very important for future.
So building retail media image as an efficient partner and as an essential partner in the marketing mix. Mark, what about you?
For me, it's bridging that online to offline gap, but with the customer experience front of mind. I saw a really cool example actually recently from, I think, Diageo, who did it was a pretty simple digital sign in Asda Express stores, where effectively shoppers can choose, I think, between 50 of their SKUs rather than the traditional 12 to 15 or whatever you'd normally see on a shelf. That for me is a perfect retail media engagement that plays to the consumer experience, giving them great customer, great SKU selection in an environment they wouldn't normally get it. So that's something I'm curious to build on over the next few months with the customer experience.
Quite an ambitious plan for the next 6 months. Georgia, what is it for you? Probably also something regarding the loyalty data or something in a different direction?
Yeah, we can go for that. So for me, it's actually around how we can provide brands real actionable insights. And what I mean by that is actually how do we provide data that's more in real time, deeper, that's got real strategy behind it to understand actually what are the recommendations for the future to help everybody learn and grow within the sort of retail media journey that we're on. We have so much customer data, but now I think it's how accessible we make it and how easy to digest and to understand we make it for those that are using the retail media network.
Indeed, something very important and also helping to increase the efficiency of the retail media networks and why the investment needs to be dived there. Maurits.
There are so many priorities, but they all go on the one thing, is that there's still so much to learn and to improve. So it's having joint surfing lessons together with our advertisers and agencies to start, to surf the third wave of retail media even better and better. But there's one thing which is, or actually there's two things that are not personally my priority, but I would like to see them more because almost nobody is talking about them. And it's two things. One is I hear very little people talk about really consumer-centric thinking. So improving the UX and the relevance for consumers. We're always thinking ourselves, as an advertiser or an agency or a retailer, but we should really, really think consumer-centric because that's what we are working for in the end. And the other one is ESG, or CSR, what have you, all these abbreviations. So things like carbon, privacy, amplifying good products and good messages. There's relatively little people talking these two subjects. So sustainability and really thinking consumer-centric.
Thank you. I think it's a very good quote that you said that we could finish this session with. We are all surfing on the wave of retail media, constantly learning, constantly experimenting, doing mistakes, but at the same time moving forward. Thank you very much. It was a big, big pleasure to be here together with you.
Thank you all, and special thanks to you, Maria, for putting up such a very interesting panel. Thank you to Maurits, Mark, Gonzalo, and Georgia as well. And as you all talked a lot about standards and measurement and how we can make the accessibility or provide a better accessibility to retail media for all our partners and advertisers,